Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Let's see, this is week and a half, 2 weeks post the AOS team's fall retreat in Massachusetts, held by Wicked Dicey. While I was there, Connor, who's a subscriber to this channel, came up and said hi to me and said, "Oh, you're the one with the YouTube channel, right?" And I was like, "Yeah, oh my gosh, this is the first time anybody's ever come up to me in real life and said that." Uh, and Connor said, "Hey, I've been waiting on you to do this OBR video that you keep mentioning, and it would have been useful if you did it prior to this event." So, nice to meet you, Connor. And I've been sufficiently guilted into doing this now. It's time for the OBR analysis video. I think I've said a couple times, I think OBR is a little busted. I think it's very good. Probably in the top three, maybe. I don't think the stats bear this out right now, but they just seem really, really good. I've played them. I played them at Nova. I played them at. So I played them at Nova. I played them at King of the Pumpkin Spice RTT. I played them this weekend, last weekend, 2 weekends ago. Whenever I just said this was. Yeah, it was last weekend at the AOS Teams Fall Retreat. And I've played a couple different lists, so I figured I'd go through and I'd talk a little bit about what I think makes OBR good and what is good in the faction, and then go through a couple different lists that I think play to the strengths, and talk about a couple different list archetypes, and then talk a little bit about like in-game strategy and things I've realized in playing them a little bit. So at Nova, I went 3-2 before I dropped. Then I went 3-0 and I won the King of the Pumpkin Spice RTT. And then at the Fall Retreat, that's obviously a team format, so like it's a little different. So I was one of the people on the team that we were trying to pair for a little bit and get into the right maps for my army, and expecting me to do well and get points. So I went 3-1. I did fail one game to get the points, but did pretty well. So yeah, have a bit of OBR experience. The current list I'm running is very similar to Michael Rosh's Nova list, where he did very well. And yeah, I'm having a lot of fun with OBR. At the beginning of the edition, 4th edition, I was trying to play a very similar list to what I played in 3rd with Archon and stuff, and I was just like, this is terrible, there's no healing anymore, yada yada, this is bad. But now that the edition has settled a little bit, and like I know what I'm doing with the edition rules and the tactics and everything, and I let go of the old way of playing and adjusted a little bit to what they are now, OBR feels really good. So basically the things that make OBR very strong right now are save stacking, particularly if you have Catacross, but they're just very tanky in general, and they're actually very mobile. So Mortec Guard are like not the things that are good right now. I'll kind of go through maybe I should pull up one of those tier list makers that everyone has. I don't even know what people use. I'm curious now. Tier maker, make a tier list for everything. I'm sure I have to be prepared with like images and things to throw on this. Yeah, I think this is the one everybody does. All right, I'm not gonna do this now. Mortec Guard are bad. At least I haven't made them work. There's no crematorians anymore. So the things that are good are things that are fast, generally. So the Morghasts are very good, and the Death Riders are also extremely good. Both of those are moving 10 inches, and the Morghasts can fly. And then, of course, with your Relentless Discipline abilities, you're giving out +2 to move, +2 movement to everything in a bubble. So often things are moving 12, even things like a Mortis Guard are moving like 7. So you're much faster than people maybe expect you to be. You also have, so if you're super brand new to OBR, maybe I should go through the Relentless Discipline things. So In the move, charge, and combat phases, you have your 2 abilities. You get to pick one of the 2 for a hero to put out in a bubble around them. Most heroes are 12-inch bubbles. Catacross is 18 instead. That's part of what makes Catacross so strong. So as mentioned, in the movement phase, you can give +2 to move, or you can give retreat and charge later in the turn. So that one's a little funny because you pop the ability in the movement phase, but of course it matters in the charge phase. So the timing where the bubble being close to the hero actually matters is when you go to charge in the charge phase. So your hero doesn't have to be next to the unit that's going to be retreating and charging in the move phase when he pops the ability, only later in the turn when you go to charge. So like you can move your things closer together to get in the bubble. In the charge phase, you get +1 to charge. Always very strong. That's also especially very strong if you're countercharging. Like there's not a ton of things that can get plus to charge moves in like the opponent's turn when you're countercharging. So that is very strong. The other one in the charge phase is if you are getting charged, you can pop in the enemy charge phase, for example, the +1 anti-charge rend. That can catch people really off guard. By which I mean, you're always trying to make sure you're not like springing surprises on the opponent, but like even telling people these things pre-game, like, hey, here are the things I can do, even if they've played OBR before. You're not necessarily always thinking, oh, I'm going to go in and they're going to get +1 anti-charge rend. And it's very strong because like, even your anvils, like, say you have like Catacross and the Immortus Guard like standing next to each other as an anvil, you go into that and suddenly everything's Ren 2 and 3, and like that is extremely scary. Or I've had times when some monster charged my Morghasts, right? And I go anti-charge Ren bubble, and then suddenly the Morghasts are on Ren 4 when they get to attack back, which is just horrifying. And then, of course, in the combat phase, we have the 5-up ward save in a bubble. So everything in the army has a 6-up ward save because it's death. But you go to a 5-up ward save in the bubble with that Relentless Discipline ability, or you have +1 to wound. I almost always tend to find myself using the 5-up ward bubble if I'm playing Catacross. The Morghasts, which are kind of the big damage dealers, they already wound on 2s. I will say if you don't need the 5-up ward bubble, the +1 to wound is obviously very good on the Catacross, on the Immortus Guard, on the Death Riders. So like if you're playing more of a Death Rider focus list and you're going in with a bunch of Death Riders, you're probably popping the +1 to wound since they wound on 4s natively. That really hurts. So going to 3s to wound really helps with the Death Riders. So all of these abilities are extremely strong, and you get to pick which of the 2 and kind of tailor what you're using in any given scenario. So that is very strong and just provides like a lot of flexibility, a lot of tactical opportunities there. So yeah, Relentless Discipline, very strong. In terms of what is strong in the books, so I said Death Riders, the fast things. Death Riders, Morghasts of either variety. The armies that I've seen, the lists I've seen doing the best out of OBR go one of 2 ways. And I think these are the 2 stronger ways to play OBR. I think you either go Catacross, who I will talk about in a minute, but is just ridiculously good, or you go Nagash. And those are kind of the 2 archetypes of OBR that we see doing very well. So you either have Catacross in like a 2-drop with another hero, probably 2 other heroes because the Leech Cavalos can go in Catacross's regiment, or you have Nagash in like a 1-drop with a bunch of things that hit hard. And I think, so that you've got Catacross, you've got Nagash, and then within those 2, you're mixing and matching those with one of 2 other things, right? So you either have Catacross or Nagash, and then I think you either have just a bunch of Death Riders with either of those, or you have more of a mixed thing where you have probably a unit of 10 Death Riders, a unit of 4 Morghasts of either variety, a Mortis Guard, a little bit more variety. So it's kind of either Morghast and Death Riders or all Death Riders. You may be sensing a theme here. Death Riders are very good. So looking at the lists I have pulled up, I think I have one of each basically of those varieties. So Michael Roche at Nova made a very good run of it. I think may have been in the final game and lost to Caleb. But he has Catacross, 3 Immortus Guard. I think if you're taking Catacross, you automatically take 3 Immortus Guard. Actually, I think you always... Never mind. I think you just always take 3 Immortus Guard. I think these are auto-include if you have Nagash or Catacross, right? Because +1 to ward on your big hero that you're paying 5 or 900 points for is fantastic. And the Immortus Guard also are pretty good in their own right. Like I've been a little surprised at like how good just 9 attacks at 3/3s, Ren 1, 2 damage is, right? Because a lot of time you're getting that +1 anti-charge Ren, you're getting maybe +1 to wound, like it, and even without those buffs, like with the double hits, it can spike. It felt very good. So he's got that. He has the Liege Cavalos with the Helm of Tyranny and Diversionary Tactics. So the Diversionary Tactics is the -2 to charge within 12 inches bubble. And the Helm of Tyranny, I believe, is -2 or 3 to control scores for units nearby. That may just be infantry, but let me double check that real quick. That can be very... I mean, -2 control score is always good, right? But of course the OBR also, I haven't even talked about the endless spells. We have an endless spell to also give -5 to control score of infantry within 6 inches of that. Yeah, all right. So Helm of Tyranny is just -2 to all enemy units while they're within 12. That is amazing. Combining that with the Aviarch Sentry, I think, is the endless spell that gives -5 to control scores of infantry within 6. You have a lot of minuses. And then Catacross, I should get through the list before I dive too deep into it. Catacross also gives you +2 control, so I'll talk about that a little more in a second. So that's Regiment 1, that's Catacross's regiment. And then you have Vakmortian with 10 Death Riders and 4 Morghast Archai. This was before the FAQ, of course, that nerfed priority target a little bit. So part of what's good about Michael's setup here is that he's keeping the 2 big hitting units, the Archai and the Death Riders, out of the General's regiment. So they're not getting nobody's getting +1 to hit and wound against your 2 big units that you're relying on. And I can only assume every game he took the Immortus Guard, the bodyguarding Catacross, so that anything that goes into the Catacross and the Immortus Guard are at -1 attack. So my list that I've been running is almost identical to this. I don't even really need to pull it up. This is what I was running. You can see here now that it doesn't matter for what's in your General's regiment for priority target. I have the Death Riders up here instead of down here. That's also partially, actually, I think I have to have it up there because I have the Soul Mason instead of Vakmortian. So Michael has Vakmortian, I have the Soul Mason. Other than that, it's basically identical. I took different, so it's not identical. I took different artifacts. So in this list, I had Diversionary Tactics on the Soul Mason, and I had the Load of Saturation on the Liege Cavalos, just to not have to worry about being in Catacross's bubble for the 5-up ward and make him a little extra tanky. I ran this exact same list at the team retreat. I think it's really good. But just to deep dive a little bit into this list, or this style of list, Catacross just does so much for you. The biggest thing is probably that the Relentless Discipline bubble is 18 from Catacross instead of 12. And that is just massive. Like 18-inch out from Catacross, if he's standing in the middle of the board, is like 75% of the board, right? And it's probably all of the board that really matters. So just being able to give basically your whole army the 5-up ward or the +1 to wound or everything else is absolutely massive. Catacross also has the not -1. Catacross can cancel a command on a 5-up once a turn, which is huge. From what I heard about Michael Rosh's game against, I think it was Tom Guan with Lumineth, just canceled, like it was against somebody who was like relying a lot on the shooting your opponent's turn, the counter shoot with like a good shooting unit. And apparently that game, like Michael just canceled the counter shoot command like every turn, which made it a very close game, and I think maybe gave him the win. Honestly, probably enough that it flipped a minor loss like to a minor win. For myself, like it's a 5-up, right? So it doesn't always work, but when it comes up huge. So at the team's retreat, my last game was against Keenan playing Seraphon, and he kind of surprised me by taking turn 1, and he ran his 10 Raptidon Chargers up and was going to charge into my Death Riders. And I was like, this could be bad. Like, I don't think you're going to wipe the Death Riders, but I was kind of expecting to go first. He won the roll-off, right? So he was going to determine who goes first or second, and I was expecting him to take second. So I was like, well, crap. I can probably fight back from this, but like he's gonna kill a lot of Death Riders. Instead, what happened was he ran up to within 3. I redeployed away like 2 inches because I was like, I might as well make this harder. You never know. You can always fail a 5 or 6 charge. So I made it a 5-inch charge. He rolled a 4, so he had to re-roll it. And I he spent the command point, and I canceled it with Catacross. So instead of him killing, I don't know, most of my Death Riders turn 1, at least half, I haven't done the math. Instead, his 10 Rapidon Charger unit is just sitting in front of my Death Riders and my Morghasts, just hanging out, ready to die. So my first turn, that basically flipped the whole game on its head from turn 1, right? So I was able to that let me turn 1 do the death tactic to pick a unit and kill it. I just killed the Raptidons. The Morghasts went in and just completely exploded them. Did 32 wounds, as they do. So the canceling command things, you miss it a lot, but then when it comes up, it can definitely come up huge. The thing I alluded to earlier, also Catacross gives +3 to control scores of everything of yours wholly within 18. I didn't appreciate how big of a deal this was really until this last weekend. I don't think it came up that much at the Pumpkin Spice RTT at Tables and Towers, but it definitely came up huge multiple times at the team tournament. Because this is if you think about it, when you're brawling on objectives, I had 2 Morghasts on a point, and suddenly that goes from being 4 to 7. That is a huge difference. If you're fighting a big monster that is control score 5, that suddenly lets your 3 or 4 Mortis Guard, or your, if you've lost half your Archai, right? That lets 2 Archai outcount a 5 control score monster. That lets your 4 Mortis Guard, who are control 1, outscore a control score 5 monster. It just really swings things on the margin in your favor, which is huge. Catacross himself is a little slow, but he hits hard, and this little block here, the Mortis Guard bodyguarding Catacross to give +1 ward and -1 attack, no one is ever killing that, right? You're just not getting through that. Anything in the game, unless you spike some rolls, is going to bounce off that. It just nothing's gonna kill it. It's just not killable. I've never had Catacross die. I have had people get through the 3 Immortus Guard. I don't know why I was saying it's 4. 3 Immortus Guard. I've had people get through that. It's 12 wounds. But with the last thing that I'm about to say with Catacross, it's so strong. So the other thing Catacross has is, of course, in your hero phase, you can spend a command point to hand out +1 to save to up to 3 units wholly within 18 of Catacross. So this is why with Catacross in the list, you go Morghast Archai instead of Morghast Harbingers, is because they're on a 3-up save base instead of a 4-up. So you've got the Morghast on a 3-up base, you've got the Immortus Guard on a 3-up base, you've got Catacross on the 3-up base. And the Leash Cavalis is on a 3-up base. So being able to put 3 of those to a 2-up save base before an all-out defense is just ludicrously good. Especially the Morghast Archai. where they are swinging back and just slaughtering things. Having Morghast Archai go to a 1-up save when something goes in is insane. Because you're gonna lose one Morghast, right? Maximum. Probably. And then you're just gonna kill whatever went into you. Especially with the +1 anti-charge rend, right? The scenario I was alluding to earlier was I played Sylvaneth, and they threw Durthu into the Morghast Archai. And I didn't even have the +1 to save up from Catacross yet, because he went first. And, I all out defense to go to 2-up, and I lost one Morghast, and then I just killed Durthu back. like pretty trivially. It was awful for him. The amount of hammers I've had go in and just kill 1 or 0 Morghasts is absurd. I had Vordry and a reinforced unit of Blood Knights go into Morghasts with the Catacross save buff on them and kill 2. And then I'm just sitting there brawling it out. At the team tournament, I had the Morghasts brawling with a reinforced unit of Kroxigors who even have the +1 rend against infantry, and 3 Agrodons, and just brawled it out and won. So at the end, I had 1 or 2 Morghasts left standing and no Kroxigors. The Agrodons fucked off to do other things eventually, but yeah. So really, the strength of this list is your save stacking, and things hit pretty hard, and you're fast. So it's just that combination is just crazy, right? These two things, your big hammers, Catacross with the Catacross buff, the Death Riders are going to be on a 3-up save. The Morghasts are going to be on a 2-up save, and you can all out defense one of those in whatever phase. The other one maybe is getting all out attack, and it just gets nutty, right? And then you have the 5-up ward bubble. So the amount of things that can get through a 1-up save and a 5-up ward are basically nothing. I can't think of anything in the game that just deals with that, right? Most of the time, the most Ren you're dealing with is Ren 2. It's very rare that you're dealing with Ren 2. Or sorry, Ren 3 or higher. And most of the things in the game are Ren 1. So the fact that on your hammer units, you can be against Ren 1, either a 2-up save or a 3-up save all the time, is just ludicrous. Right? It's just so good. I don't think I need to go into any more detail about this, right? It's clearly amazing to have all of your units on reliable 2-up saves. So that's really the big strength of the list. The other thing is, I think the army does tactics very well in a way that I'll talk about a little bit later, a little bit more later. So this is kind of list archetype number 1. I should also talk about Vagmortian versus the Soul Mason. Ted, where's your list? Ted Adams, also a very good player who plays in the same area as I do. Also went to the World Champs last year with OBR in Atlanta. Also likes Vagmortian. So Vagmortian basically is baby Be'lakor, right? So once per game, there's a 12-inch range ability you can use. You can pick a unit, and that unit suddenly has to spend a command to do any, is it non-fight core abilities? Or it might just be all core abilities, right? So if you want to move, you have to spend a command point. If you want to charge, you have to spend a command point. That is clearly amazing once per game. It's an amazing ability. And the Mortisan Council does not specify non-unique wizards. It's just infantry wizards. So basically everybody but Archon. So he's also a 2-caster at +1 to cast. And I think 2 cast at +1 to cast is an amazing place to be this edition with Magic. 1 cast feels a little low, especially with no pluses, you're not getting that much. And then on the flip side, I've played a little bit of Seraphon where I have the Slan and the Skink Starseer, which is 5 casts. And that feels like overkill. Like that feels like too much. That feels like I'm not utilizing all my casts all the time. So yeah, 2 casts at +1 is like a very nice place to be. While I'm talking about casting, one of the other things I talked slightly about so far is the endless spells. We have a very good suite of endless spells, right? We have the thing that's decreasing infantry control scores is great. That model also fights pretty well. I think it's 6 attacks that are 4s and 2s, Ren 1, D3 damage. Like, that is nothing to sneeze at. We have the Angriest Ghost, the Nightmare Predator, which is 6 attacks, 4s, 2s, Ren 2, 2 damage. Again, nothing to slouch at. That's great. And we also have the Bone-Type Shrieker, which is maybe the best of them all, because that is giving you the 12-inch bubble of -1 to ward save. So not only is your army ridiculously tanky, you are making other armies less tanky with that endless spell. And you also have good rend. So you're getting through other tanky armies like pretty well. The other thing you have to think about is the fact that all 3 of those endless spells are predatory. So you also have the opportunity to use them to screen out things that are deep striking in, like potentially behind your lines, which is also very good. So Vokmortian, yep, good. I've been taking the Soul Mason. I will admit part of this is just that I have the Soul Mason painted, and I have a Vokmortian, but I don't have the Vokmortian painted, and I haven't been in a rush to paint him because I think the Soul Mason is also good. So the Soul Mason, I honestly kind of think it's basically an even swap between Vokmortian and the Soul Mason. I could see Vokmortian being maybe a little bit better for the counterplay with the little Bellicor type ability. But the Soul Mason, what the Soul Mason gets you is the War Scroll spell that makes something strike first. Now it only lasts for the turn, not for until your next hero phase. But it's still very good, and you still have the threat of casting it in your opponent's phase. If you're +1 to cast from your subfaction, whatever they call it now, battle formation, whatever. If you're +1 to cast from that, and you're also next to a place of power, you're casting that on a 6 in the enemy turn, which is great. 6 is very, very hittable. Obviously, they can dispel, but this is just, it's come up multiple times. Like, I've hit this multiple times where, like, they were going to try and do something. They were going to try and charge in, like, charge the Morghasts, right? And I got this off in the enemy turn, and suddenly their whole plan is looking way scarier, right? So 4 Morghasts attacking before anything else is going to do, if not fatal, crippling damage. So I value that strike first a lot. It also helps in your turn to sequence things where you can, if you're charging in 2 things and there's something that's going to hit back that's potentially scary, but a little glass cannony, that's kind of the perfect scenario where you can have one unit strike first and then your other unit go after it, and suddenly you're not as worried about the strike back from the enemy. So I value that strike first spell very well. Other than that, it functions essentially identically as Vokmortian, but with the other bonus that you can, if you want to, you can spread out your heroic trait and your artifact more. In Michael's list, the Leech Cavalis has to hold both of them because he's the only one that can. Does that matter that much for this list? That, I don't know, maybe not. I had diversionary tactics on the Soul Mason, mainly thinking about, so not so much thinking about like things on the front line getting a charge debuff, but for this I was thinking Soul Mason is going to be sitting my back line. If things deep strike 9 away, suddenly they need an 11-inch charge, like, to get to the Soul Mason, which is way less makeable. So suddenly this guy is like almost immune from things deep striking or teleporting into my backfield and charging him and killing him. Because a rerollable 9-inch charge, that's basically 50%. Even a rerollable 11 is awful. So I had the diversionary tactics on the Soul Mason. Ideally, in an ideal world, he's also keeping up with like Catacross and the Immortus Guard, and so potentially giving that debuff out to some other things that are charging in from the front. That did happen a couple times. I think I'm really being disorganized about this. I'll talk a little bit more about these two lists I have, and then I'll go back to my thought. So Ted Adams, he brought to the Pumpkin Spice RTT. He came in third with this. He was also there were 3-3-0s, I think. So it was myself, Ted, and Soulblight were 3-0s. So Ted came in third. I ended up winning on points that tournament. But Ted has the other option from the Morghasts, which is just all ponies. So just run people over with horses. So you can see this little unit is the same. It's Catacross, Leech Cavalos, Immortus Guard, Bachmortian, 10 Death Riders, and then it's just a straight swap from 540 points of Morghasts to 540 points of more Death Riders. So for 4 Morghasts, you can get 15 Death Riders. So this is 25 in 2x10 and 1x5. This is more of a, well, I don't know exactly how Ted played it or how Leo plays the version with Nagash, but it feels a little more go. You're also probably relying a little bit more on your retreat and charge command, since the Death Riders as cavalry, they get +1 damage on the charge. So you're kind of relying more on going in and then having the ability to retreat back out, charge back in, really keep that damage buff up. So let's see, 10. Yeah, I feel like the damage is fairly comparable between the 10 Death Riders and the 4 Morghasts, if you're getting the charge off on the Death Riders. But the Morghasts are more survivable in the Catacross version because they're on a 3-up save base. I don't think it ever came up, but they also have that ward save against like spells and endless spells, mortals. Never really came up. It's never come up for me, but it's there. So yeah, this is just a little bit more of a run fast, charge in, kill things, move back out, charge back in. Whereas I think the Morghasts can brawl for a little bit longer and just kind of sit and not have to use the retreat and charge. And then the last archetype I'll talk about is Nagash. So Nagash, again, Leo played this list at Nova with Nagash and 30 Death Riders, which is just absurd. So Nagash, as opposed to Catacross, the big difference here, you can still kind of get your 5-up ward on everything, but instead of it being just the bubble for Relentless Discipline, you're using the Nagash recastable War Scroll spell. So it's a little less reliable in that you obviously have to hit the casting value, and it can be unbound. Does your opponent want to waste unbinds when you're just trying to throw 4 or 5-up wards on your 4 Death Rider units? Maybe not. But that also frees you up. The good thing about that, so you can fail it, that's bad. The good part is if you're giving your 5-up ward to all of the units around you with your spell, then that frees you up to go +1 to wound in the combat phase, and that really helps with the Death Riders going from a 4-up to a 3-up, as I mentioned before. This list scares me a little bit. I imagine you're just jamming Death Riders in, and therefore they're not getting to Nagash. When I ran the Nagash list, I ran the other kind of Nagash list at Nova, so I had the 3 Immortus Guard to buff up the ward save to a 4-up. So suddenly it's even harder to kill Nagash. And I had 4 Morghast Harbingers instead of a bunch of Death Riders. So instead of this, I had, like I said, Morghast Harbingers. I think I had 5 Death Riders. I should have pulled up my Nova list. But one of the things there, the difference between the Morghasts. So the Archai, you want to take the Archai with Catacross, because you're save stacking there. You're going from your 3-up to your 2-up, and you're brawling. In the Nagash list, you want the Harbingers. And the reason you want the Harbingers with Nagash is you get the 3d6 charge. So that's very good. Nagash can also bring a unit back from the dead. So you're kind of, the way I played it, and I should have played it a little smarter, I was kind of flinging up the Harbingers to kill things and not worrying too much about them getting killed back. And then once they do die, Nagash is bringing them back 9 inches away, and you can make a 9-inch away charge on 3d6. So it's very strong to be able to bring back the 4 Harbingers and immediately charge them back in, and just always be doing damage with your Morghasts. So that's the reasoning behind which Morghasts you're taking and which with which hero, which big hero. I don't know that there's much more to say about Nagash. Again, this is just a super fast list. Nagash is moving 10. All the Death Riders are moving 10. So you're really getting to where you want to go on the board, when you want to. Like you can really control your engagements. Of course, that all means, most of that is then moving 12 because of your +2 move. So it's just very, very fast. And that just, that turns up to 11 when you've got the Morghast making 3d6 charges. So yeah, there's some things that can definitely mess with you, especially the all horse list. I think gets countered a little bit harder by things like, especially like Blades of Corn. I've beaten Blades of Corn. It's not like a good matchup for the Blades of Corn, but if you're relying on retreating out and charging back in, or just charging in general, I have had that messed up before by Corn blood tithing into me. So like I retreat, I'm like, I'm just gonna retreat 4 inches out with the Death Rider, so I have a very makeable charge, not thinking, oh, actually I need to be 6 inches away because of, they can burn your list. 6-inch charge is still very makeable. Just if you're playing Corn, make sure you retreat out and be 6.5 away from the thing you're trying to charge back into to retreat and charge, not less than that, because Blood Tithe will mess you up. Yeah, so that's kind of all of the list archetypes I wanted to go over. You will note none of these lists have Mortek Guard. None of them have Harvesters. The Harvester seems bad to me. I think the problem with the Harvester right now is that it's doing a lot of its healing off of killing infantry, and a lot of the things in the game are not infantry. This is a very cav heavy season. It's a very monster heavy season. So it's kind of very rare that like your Harvester would be doing a bunch of healing off of killing little chaff infantry units. The Catapult still intrigues me. I think I feel like there's room for a Catapult in some lists, right? I don't know what list, but these lists are like very well optimized, and it doesn't feel like changing them to fit in a Catapult is like the optimal thing to do. Let's see, the Leech Cavalos is 210. I think the Catapult is, I'm just gonna look it up. I feel like you can finagle things a little bit, right? So the Catapult's 260. So if you were at 1950 and dropped the Leech Cavalos for a Catapult, that could potentially be interesting. But none of these lists are at 1950. Even post changes, I think post point update, you're still at like 1960 or 1970. So it's not easy to fit in the Catapult. At that point, you're probably rejiggering things with maybe dropping some like Death Riders. In my list, I definitely don't want to drop the Morghast Archai. I would probably drop Death Riders before Archai. But yeah, at that point, you're really messing around with this basic core list archetype. I do think it's good. I think the Catapult's good. It does a lot of damage, right? Like D3 +2 on 4 attacks that can have crit 2 hit, that do have crit 2 hits, is kind of potentially bonkers. Like you can definitely spike that and do like 10 damage to something, which feels real strong. And then the 4 up to like give something strike last is good. The issue is I don't think it's good enough that you build into like multiple catapults and the Os effector to buff that roll for strike last. Because yeah, you like two crawlers are 520. That could be 4 Morghasts, and I don't think it's better than 4 Morghasts. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe. So there's the subfaction. Yeah, I don't know. That's the thing. You're trading your +1 to cast on your 2 casts for +1 to hit in that subfaction for your 2 crawlers. If they don't move and they're in your territory, I could see a world where that's good. I don't know. I think there's room to explore here. I think OBR is good enough that there's a little room to explore. I do think the lists I've talked about here are the best things. There were a couple lists at the team's retreat that had neither Catacross nor Nagash, and just had units. I don't think they did very well. Let's see. Ross might have been one. Maybe they did do well. Let's see. Maybe this is the new hotness that I don't know about. Right. So we had Oscar went 4-0 with Nagash, a Mortis Guard, and 25 Death Riders. I really like that. Again, this is teams. So again, if you're the scoring person on the team and your team is prioritizing getting you into a good winning matchup, there's only so much we can take from team's list. But yeah, so this is kind of what I was talking about. So this is exactly what I was talking about. So this is the no Catacross, no Nagash, 2 hero list. So you've got a Liege Cavalos and the Soul Mason, both of which I like. You've got 10 Death Riders, 5 Death Riders, 4 Harbingers, 1 Mortek Crawler, and this has 2 units of the Tyrannic cohort. So maybe this is the forbidden tech, right? Maybe this is the secret forbidden tech where you're not taking either of the big baddies. You're just leaning into having just very solid War Scrolls and units, just in general. I think it feels totally viable to me, but Catacross is just so good, so absurdly good. I think Catacross is by far the strongest OBR list you can take. Because again, just the amount of times that I've had the other person, both of the other person's hammers go in and just do 5 damage, through my 1-up, 5-up, is disgusting. It's just absurdly good. Yeah, Mighty Archaeosian. So this is a very tanky Liege Cavalos. Mighty Archaeosian is you're not getting hit. I think you're only getting hit on 4s through 6s, so you can't get hit on 2s or 3s. Load of Saturation is the 5-up ward. Archaeosian is not as good as it used to be, where your save couldn't be rendered. But this guy's still very tanky. I think that one of the other 2 heroic traits are better. So obviously -2 to charge, always good. I think your heroic trait depends on your local meta. So in general, I've been taking diversionary tactics for -to charge for the reasons I talked about before. I think there is definitely an argument to be made if you are in a local meta where there is a lot of shooting. And that seems to be increasingly the norm, especially with like the Rattling guns now being the new Skaven hotness. There's very much an argument to be made for taking Aura of Sterility, so giving -1 to wound in a 12-inch bubble against shooting. So that really helps neuter things like the ridiculous 18 Rattling guns and that sort of thing. And then, yeah, I think Helm of Tyranny or Load of Saturation are kind of the 2 options for your artifact. I don't think the other one is very good. I have found in general that like you are killing enough and holding your points well enough, and with Catacrosses, especially with Catacrosses, where's the Catacross list? +3 control score. I haven't really needed the Helm of Tyranny. I've had 1 or 2. I can remember 1 or 2 times where like I may have taken an objective in a turn if I had that. and the Liege Cavalos was near where it mattered, right? Because the other thing about the Liege Cavalos is it's just a very he's just a very solid like solo operator, um, especially with the load of saturation, where you don't care if you are within the 18-inch, if you have Catacross 18-inch 5 ward bubble. He can kind of run off on a flank, and like nothing that no little shitty unit that people are using to take the flanks is gonna kill this Liege Cavalos. He's gonna be on probably a 2-up save if you give him Catacross buff, or I'll let defense him when you need to, and he's gonna be on a 5-up ward. Even with 7 wounds, little chaff things are not killing that. And he can hit decently hard back. He's Ren 1 3 damage on the charge with 5 attacks, or 2 damage not on the charge, and you can absolutely spike the crit double hits. Honestly, that's one of the most fun things about OBR is the crit double hits on most of your units, because there will absolutely be times where you just roll like 4 6s and you're like, oh buddy, we're in business, like here we go. Last weekend against Jack, Rush LaRue's Slanesh, like I had the Legion Cavalis just holding it down a flank. He got charged by 8 Hellstriders, which, side note, I think are very bad. And just, he took 1 damage. he got charged by eight little Cav guys. He took 1 damage. And then I swung back, and I think I rolled like 3 6s on his 5 attacks, and I hit with the other 2. So I did like 8 hits on 5 attacks, and I did like 10 damage or something and killed like 3 or 4 Hellstriders. Like it was disgusting. It's ridiculous. So you really have the opportunity with those crit double hits to spike. And hopefully you're getting Empower Nadirate on the Archai. So they're double critting on 5s and 6s, and suddenly, these things are just killing everything. Like I said, I mentioned before, I charged the Morghast and the Death Riders into the 10 Raptidons, which is 30 wounds, on a very bad save, to be fair. But the Death Riders didn't even need to attack. The Morghasts did 30 wounds to it, just right off the bat. Other units. Where's my Tradic cohort? Right, the Tradic cohort is an interesting addition to the army. So you have these, what is it? It's like 16 wounds, and it deep strikes on like a 4-up save. So like it's a pretty strong little unit for a 140 point deep striking unit. Let me pull it up. So let's see. They're 2 health, 8 models. Yeah. Honestly, this might be a little undercosted, because they're a 7-inch move, which is very solid. 4-up save for 16 wounds, so you're under 10 points a wound at 140 for a unit that deep strikes, moves 7, and then let's see, how many of these have the Claws and Talon, and how many? So 2 out of 8 replace Claws. All right, so you've only got 2 out of the 8 that have the 3s, 4s, Ren 1, 1 damage, crit 2 hits. Everything else is just companion weapons, 4s, 3s, no Ren, 1 damage. So that's pretty bad. So they're really not hurting anything. Even, I don't know, even like mage hunting, they can do that, but they're not very good. I don't know. It's cheap wounds, but I think I'm at the point where I'm gonna take the last like 10 minutes to talk a little bit about in-game tactics here. So for the reasons I'm about to talk about, I don't think you really need a deep striker. So talking about in-game stuff. So I'm gonna be talking about this from the standpoint of this list that I've been playing a lot, because this is what I have the most experience with. This is what I've done the most winning with. I think, let's see, after last weekend, so Pumpkin Spice RTT, the 4 games in the team tournament, which again, the caveat of getting good, decent matchups. I think I'm like 8 or 9-1 with this list. So I was 6-1 between those 2 tournaments. And I had like I think I had 2 other wins before that with this list. So I'm like 8-1 with this. With the Nagash list, I was like, I think I was undefeated over 4 or 5 games practicing before Nova, and then I lost 2 games at Nova. But yeah, the thing that helped me, the thing that I realized with this list, and I kind of realized this at the at that RTT in Westminster, is you don't care about take the flanks. You absolutely do not need to take the flanks with this list to win the game and get all your tactics. So I'm just scooting this over so you can see it while I'm drawing on this. So yeah, the thing I realized at that tournament, you don't need to take the flanks. You have plenty of tactics to do, and you're strong enough that it doesn't matter. So generally, what I've been doing, let me make some blobs here. I'm gonna do red. So generally, the way I've been deploying is you have big Catacross here in the middle. You've got your Immortus Guard next to it. I should have some way of labeling this, but I don't. And then basically going heavy on one flank or the other with like the Morghasts and the Death Riders. So I'll finish drawing here and then I'll label things. So basically I was like, how would you set up to take the flanks, right? You can have your Liege Cavalos over here. You can have, give me a rounded block. Yeah, you can have your Death Riders over here, which are a pretty big footprint. And then your 4 Morghasts go somewhere. So like, let's say my 4 Morghasts go here, and my little Soul Mason like goes back here to be ready to cast like Strike First, everything else, yada yada. Did I forget everything? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, it's only 6 units in the army. It's very small. It's very efficient. So one of the other nice things about this list is it's low unit count. It's pretty straightforward, and like, so you're not breaking your brain thinking about positioning 12 units. You're not moving 80 models a turn, slowing things down. It's very nice. So let's see. This is, oh, I need some bigger font here. Let's go bold. Let's call this, that's still tiny on the screen, isn't it? Let's go bigger, bolder. There we go. All right, so we got big old Catacross. We have the Immortus Guard. We have the Morghast Archai. We have the Liege Cavalos. And we have the Cavalos Death Riders. And I might as well label this little guy down here. This is the Mortisan Soul Mason. Da-da-da. Hooray. All right, we have labels. Right, so if you're setting up for take the flanks, you kind of need, and this honestly doesn't have to be that far over there. This doesn't need to be that far over there because you have a 12-inch move if you're in the bubble, which you can kind of keep everything in the bubble here, right? So like board edge to board edge is 60 inches. Catacross has a wide-ass base. He's like 5 inches wide probably. So then with an 18-inch bubble, you basically have 40 inches across the board to stay in the bubble turn 1. So you can be 10 inches in from that board edge. You can be 10 inches in from this board edge. You only need to be 6. You have to be within 6 of the board edge. So you can totally do take the flanks. But I think you just don't need it. So I think what you do, as a 2-drop, you have a very good chance of getting determined who goes first or second. And even if you don't, I don't think it matters. So many people, they just default into taking the flanks on the first turn. That's what they're going to do. Great. Cool. I don't think we care. I think what you do instead is, depending on what they do first turn, you have a very easy either seize the center. With your +2 to move, you can absolutely get these 2 up into the center. Or if they've moved some things up, let's call them green. Let's say they've moved up a couple units up turn 1. If they're like close enough, if they've done seize the center, for example, you just do not waver. Or if there's something very killable, you do Marked for Death from Death, or Slay the Entourage. So I think the stronger play, and what I've been doing, is you don't set up for Take the Flanks turn 1. You keep everything a little more central. Excuse me. In turn 1, if they are not near the center yet and they're not threatening a countercharge, you just move Catacross and the Immortus Guard up and you take the flanks. You probably keep the... you can probably move the Morghast right up with them. You move up your Soul Mason, and you probably keep your Death Riders back for a countercharge, right? You don't want them getting charged. They do more damage on the charge, so you want to be keeping the Death Riders a little back. And the other thing is, like, if they sent up a couple things to the flanks. Oh, I did take the flanks with my little chaff units. Whatever side your Leech Cavallos is on, you can just send your Leech Cavallos in and just kill that thing, right? Like, the Leech Cavallos is not scared of really any little thing that's going to be taking the flank. So for me, turn 1 is you're basically... Hopefully you're going second. If you're going first, I think you always do something like this. You just move up into the center and take the center. If you're going second, I think you kind of assess the situation. If they're playing very cagey and not near the center, you can still do seize the center. Because a lot of people play like very defensively. They don't want to get charged in on turn 1. I think in that case, you go up and seize the center, and it doesn't matter. If they move up, you just charge in, and you just freaking get stuck in, and you start killing them. Because you're going to have Morghast Archai on a 1-up save if you need the all-out defense. Catacross and the Immortus Guard are essentially invincible for all intents and purposes for a lot of the game. You can very easily do not waver turn 1 and just not have to worry about anything dying. Especially if the Soul Mason gets off the strike first, and you can, in that case, you can definitely charge in the Death Riders and the Morghast Archai and just not have to worry about anything, and you're just golden. I have a tickle in my throat. Let me pause this recording for just... All right, and we're back. More water. Yeah, and the thing is, like, the thing with OBR is you both do a ton of damage with your Death Riders, your Morghasts, even Catacross does a lot of damage sometimes, and you're so tanky that you are just gonna brawl. You're gonna win the brawl. You're gonna brawl harder than your opponent. So, you know, going into the center and just fighting it out in the center is completely legitimate, and you're probably gonna win that brawl. It's a little more complicated on high objective maps, obviously. Like on shifting objectives where there's just 3 objectives in the middle. Like, I don't know if you can beat OBR on that. It's ridiculous. Like, you just go in, you take 2, and they're never getting past you, and they're never fighting you off the 2 objectives. So if it's like an 8 objective map or 6 objective map, you're good. You know, you can't just sit in the center, but it's still very important to get, even in that case, horrible. Even if this is like an 8 objective map, you still almost certainly want to be putting Catacross and the Immortus Guard in the middle of the board, because you have multiple 18-inch range, bubbles, auras, abilities where you just need Catacross to be central to the board. If Catacross is in the middle of the board and you have your Morghasts and your Death Riders running off and doing things like far away on the other objectives, you are still golden. 18 inches is huge. Like, Catacross can be in the middle of the board, and if this is a 6 or an 8 objective map, like, you can still have the Morghasts and the Death Riders off on 2 of their objectives, right? And still be in your bubble. So if this was a 6 objective map, you actually, you know, let me just get rid of this green guy because he's dead. The Death Riders killed him. Because of course they would. in a 6 objective map, you probably kind of want the Death Riders and the Archai kind of on the same side. In my opinion, like you can go seize the center, and then you can kind of shift to one side. So you're basically, is there an X? Let's just go stars. So you're basically like contesting. let's not go Star of David here. Let's go 5-point star. If only there was an 8-pointed star. So like 6 objective map, you're probably contesting the 2 in the middle and then the 2 on one side. And you're just trying to outcount the other person, right? You don't need all 6 objectives. So it is perfectly fine if your opponent has the 2 over on this side. You're really trying to hold down the 2 in the middle and just kill the things on that side of the board and make sure they don't get past you. So you've got the most anviliest anvil in the game in Catacross and the Immortus Guard, and the Death Riders and the Archai, the Morghasts or whatever flavor you have, are just slaughtering everything on this side of the board. And then once you've done that, in later turns, you're fast enough where you can swing over to this side of the board and clean up whatever half of the army they have over there. Basically, if they're trying to contest both sides of the board, the things they have on one half of the board are never going to be able to kill you, right? They're never going to be able to fight the Morghasts, the Death Riders. So this is essentially what happened in my game. I mentioned that Seraphon game at the team tournament round 4. That's essentially what happened in that game. Is he had I'm running out of places to draw things. He had the Raptidon Chargers and Croxagores and a small unit of Agrodons on the left flank, and he had 6 Agrodons that he sent off over to kill my Liege Gavalos over on the other flank, and they kind of went down to get the objective that was down there and kill the Liege Gavalos, and by the time they got back from all of that, like I talked earlier, like there was the crazy thing that happened where the Raptidons didn't get to charge the Death Riders, and I canceled the re-roll the charge and all that stuff. Like, so that obviously mattered and affected this a lot. But like by the time the 6 Agrodons got back from dealing with stuff down here, I had fought through the Croxagores. I'd kind of dealt with everything that was on this flank. So I was controlling this left half of the board at that point. And just to speak to how hard to kill Catacross and these Immortus Guard are, he was a little bit in desperation mode because he was down on points. We were playing Jaws of Gallet, which was also a big deal because I had gone down early by 2 points, which is kind of what you want to do on Jaws of Gallet. So I had destroyed the 2 right objectives. So like I was controlling the only flank that had objectives at that point. But so turn 4, I think it was, he took I think I had 2 Immortus Guard left, so I had like 8 wounds of Immortus Guard left, maybe 9. He took Slay the Entourage on the Immortus Guard, and he went in with a unit of Saurus and a unit of Saurus Warriors on foot, and a unit of Agrodons, 6 Agrodons, and he didn't kill the Immortus Guard. And he wasn't that close. Like I think he killed one of the 2, and the other one had like 3 wounds left. Which that sounds close, but you have to remember the Immortus Guard are on a 1-up save, because I put the Catacross save on them because enough things had died that like it made sense to put the save on Catacross and the Immortus Guard, and I knew those Agrodons were coming from the other side of the board. And between the -1 attack from the Bodyguard, Honor Guard thing, which by the way puts the Saurus Warriors down to 1 attack from 2, puts everything in the Agrodons down from 3 to 2. He failed the tactic because he didn't kill the Immortus Guard. And then he's just stuck in the middle of the board here, not on any of the, there's 2 objectives back here that he's not getting back. And yeah, that was basically the game. Side note, he did eventually kill the Immortus Guard because the Agrodons have that, they're ramping up in the number of attacks they have as they're fighting. So he did kill the Immortus Guard, but he did not kill Catacross by the end of the game. So Catacross was still alive by the end of the game, which is absurd. So yeah, Agrodons brawl with the best of them, right? And they did not get through Catacross and the Immortus Guard in 3 rounds of combat. So yeah, that is really my basic game plan going into any game. Is I'm not worrying about controlling the flanks, taking the flanks. I'm worried about controlling the center, and then dealing with one half of the board with the knowledge that like nothing is probably going to kill Catacross in the Immortus Guard. I don't think I've ever had Catacross get killed. Talking to Ted, I don't think he's ever had Catacross get killed. Catacross is just an absolute beast. 20 wounds. You can be on a 1-up save with all-out defense. You're probably on a 4-up ward with the Immortus Guard and the 5-up ward bubble. It's nutty. It's nutty. And yeah, in tactics-wise, so again, talking about not needing take the flanks. If it ends up later in the game that you've like cleared things and you can get to the flanks and you don't, say you have your Liege Cavalos still alive, like your Liege Cavalos can get to the flanks, your Morghasts, your Death Riders could get to the flanks. Like your big hitty units are move 10 and they're fast enough that like they can get there. If later in the game you need to take the flanks, like turn 4 or 5, that's not a big deal. And I've definitely had times where like, there was one after all the brawling and fighting, there was one Morghast left. And at that point, it's like, all right, I have one little 10-inch move guy who can run off and take the flanks or take their land. So turn 1, you're really doing seize the center, or you're doing do not waver, or you're potentially killing something. In the middle of the game, when all of the fighting is happening, you have Marked for Death, you have Slay the Entourage, so those are very good. You have to remember Marked for Death, the unit has to have not lost any models, so that is a very good turn 1 or turn 2 tactic, where you're able to charge into something that hasn't lost any models yet with like your heavy hitters. And yeah, I mean, between Morghasts and Death Riders, if you do need to double up on a unit, like you really can guarantee that almost anything in the game dies. It probably doesn't kill Catacross, but you're gonna have options to do Marked for Death and Slay the Entourage most likely. And then so seize the center, do not waver, Marked for Death, Slay the Entourage. All of these are good middle of the game tactics for you. And then once things are sort of thinning out on the board, like units are dying, there's less on the board, that's kind of the point where late game you're like, I'm going to go take their land, I'm going to go take the flanks with the things I have left. That's kind of how I've been playing out games with OBR, and it's been working very well. And yeah, I think you just have to get out of the mentality of like, I do take the flanks every turn, because there's so many lists where people are building their lists where they're like, I have 2 little units that are going out to the flanks and doing take the flanks turn 1, and that's not what OBR needs to do. You want to be central. You want to be in your bubbles. You want to be central to the board, so you can kind of use your fast movement to move out and get to the places you need to go, rather than being out on the flank turn 1, and then you're kind of a lot of times like I've seen people send like units that are honestly too important out to take the flank, and then you're stuck getting back. You're probably stuck for 1 or 2 turns just getting back into the action from the flank. Especially if like, you send something important out to that flank and then I'm swinging to the other flank to really make sure that unit is out of the action for a little while. So yeah, that's kind of my high level thoughts on like OBR strategy and how you're playing out the game tactics wise. Being the underdog is really nice, actually. Like if you can arrange, like in this scenario, right? If they're standing on their 3 objectives turn 1, if you only stand on your 2 and you can arrange a scenario where like you are the underdog by 2 points after turn 1, it's actually really nice, because we have this extra thing that we're wanting to spend a command point on every turn. So getting that extra 5th command point to use on the Catacross buff and still having 4 for other things feels really, really good. That was one of the things that, Jaws of Galat is the outlier, right? Because you're removing objectives as well. But getting that underdog buff early and having the extra command point for Catacross feels really great. yeah, just other little things like the Leech Cavallos really can be a solo operator off on a flank. Like I said, there's not much that's gonna deal with him, and if they commit enough to kill him, then they're probably out of position with that unit. That could be more useful, more centrally located, and be more helpful. Um, yeah, you've got so the other thing about being central that's very important is getting out your spells. So you probably want your Bone Tithe Shrieker is kind of the most important thing to get out early, so that you can. Ooh, I don't want a second one. You probably want to prioritize getting the Bone Tithe Shrieker out first against anything that has a ward save, right? So against Nurgle, against other death armies, demons, all of those things, you really just want to get your Bone Tithe Shrieker out somewhere central early so it can be moving where it needs to go to be turning off ward saves. Infantry based armies, you could prioritize getting your the Aviarch Sentry out second, especially if they don't have ward saves. But I pretty much always prioritize turn one getting out the Shrieker, and then probably just like doing Empowered Nadirite on the Morghasts, right? Once it gets to later in the game, like turns 3, etc., you're probably close enough to be casting Drain Vitality, which is amazing. That was one of the other things that helped keep Catacross and the Immortus Guard alive. And of course, with 2 casts, you really do have to be prioritizing what you're casting. If they go first turn 1, that is a very good opportunity to just try to counterspell and get out one of your endless spells. I definitely recommend doing that, especially if like a lot of armies turn 1, they're not casting anything that's particularly impactful to you. They're probably also getting out a couple endless spells, but if they're not, you might even be outside of 30 inches of anything that can unbind you and get out your endless spell turn 1 on a 6-up if you're next to a place of power. So yeah, amidst all of this, amidst all this positioning, definitely try to get your caster, be that Vagmortian or the Soul Mason or what have you, next to a place of power, and be getting out one of your endless spells turn 1, like on the opponent's turn, is very strong. So yeah, generally my ranking on the endless spells, I want to get out the Shrieker first, then I'm probably getting out the Fighty Ghost, the Nightmare Predator, and then if I have casts to spare, I'm getting out like the Aviarch Sentry. Sometimes that might just be to pull out the bird in the backfield. Say I'm like over here, pull out the bird on the backfield to stop teleports or deep strikes onto that point is very strong. That's always something to keep in mind. Yeah, I don't know how insightful this was, but to me, my big OBR revelation was just I don't need to do take the flanks, and I especially don't need to do take the flanks like turn 1 and set up and plan for it. I want to be planning to go central on the board. I want to be doing seize the center or do not waver or even one of the kill tactics turn 1, and then just go from there. Yeah, I hope this has been useful. I hope these have been some good thoughts. I do want to experiment with lists a little bit. I talked about this forbidden tech with no Catacross, no Nagash, and just a bunch of units. I do think it's less strong than Catacross, but there's maybe potential there. I do think there's maybe potential in a catapult. One of the other things, I will say the real secret tech, which I've been contemplating, is actually a Soul Reaper. I think there's some space for a Soul Reaper to be really good. The main reason for that is I'm imagining the Soul Reaper hanging out with the Morghasts in a little bubble. So let me just clear all of this. Whee! All right, so what does the Soul Reaper bring you? For like 120 points, I think it is. You get, let's see. You're gonna think I'm crazy, but I'm telling you, I think there's play here. So it's 120 points. You get an extra cast. So I do think that you have enough to cast. We're going to 3 casts. So with either Vakmortian or the Soul Mason and the Soul Reaper, going to 3 casts is good. I think you have space to cast 3 times. It also gives you another Unbind, of course, which can be nice. And if you're in the Mortisan Council, your Soul Reaper is also casting at +1. So you're getting a third +1 to cast. And in my head, what I'm doing with it is I'm taking my 4 Morghasts and I'm placing them like in this little bubble, and I'm putting my little Soul Reaper right here in the middle, and just making these Morghasts even scarier and even tankier. Because what the Soul Reaper does, and I think it's very close, but I think that you have, I think you can set up like that, and oh my god, what have I done? Get out of here. It's very close, but the bases for the Morghasts are small enough. I think you can set up so that your opponent cannot charge the Morghasts without being in combat with the Soul Reaper. And what that gives you is the Soul Reaper has a aura where anyone in combat with him is at -1 to wound, which is an incredibly strong debuff. So you're at -1 to wound in combat with the Soul Reaper. And in addition to that, when the Soul Reaper fights, you pick a friendly non-hero infantry unit that has not fought to fight right after the Soul Reaper, and that unit gets +1 to hit. And Morghasts are infantry. So you now have this nice little unit of dudes here who, say you go into this. What are you going to do? What are you going to fight? You kind of want to kill the Morghasts because they slap super hard, right? But the Soul Reaper is debuffing you. So maybe you want to get rid of the Soul Reaper. The issue with that is you're really probably only getting your front rank. Because of the size of the Morghast bases, you're only getting your front rank of people who can attack the Soul Reaper. And the Soul Reaper is still at -1 to be wounded, right? Like, you're at -1 going into the Soul Reaper itself, too. It's on a 4-up save, 5 wounds, so it is fragile, but, you know, 4-up's no slouch. You can go to a 3-up with all defense, and you're probably going to have a 5-up ward from a big Catacross bubble, if I fit this into a Catacross list. And yeah, suddenly then, you know, let's say you're going into that. I don't think you're going to kill the Soul Reaper necessarily, and you're definitely, if you attack the Morghasts, as we've talked about, you're probably not killing enough of the Morghasts to make the hit back, you know, not scary. So yeah, then suddenly you're not spending an all-out attack point to get the Morghasts to be hitting on 2s because you're triggering a chain fight from the Soul Reaper. If this guy is on the front lines, you know, you're running him up to be with the Morghasts, and things are engaging, you're going to be in range to drain Vitality. So probably your Soul Reaper is prioritizing casting Drain Vitality, because that's only a 12-inch move now, or sorry, 12-inch range now, and I've tended to find that my Soul Mason is like not in range to cast most of the time. So yeah, I don't know. In theory crafting, I'm like, this feels like a very strong little module that I may be able to fit in. I don't know. Like I said, it's 120 points, so I'm down 30. So I need to free up 90 points somehow. I don't want to drop the Immortus Guard. Yeah, I don't know. In my head, I'm like, maybe if I drop that, it's very awkward points, right? It's kind of the issue with OBR and list building is you have a low number of high cost units, and that makes list building and tweaking lists very difficult. I've talked about that in a previous video, like with regards to OBR and Slaves to Darkness, is it's a little bit hard to balance with points because of that. Because, one sec. Basically, if you're upping the points on any of these things, suddenly you're left with an army that just doesn't have anything in it, right? Or you're like filling points. you're filling points with you're filling your space with units that are bad. So like, oh, suddenly I'm having to drop 2 of my 4 Morghasts and put in like the Triadic cohort, right, for 140, or like a 10 more tech guard, which just, it's not like fulfilling a purpose you need in the list. It's just really weakening the list, and it's making your OBR players sad because like they don't get to play with their cool unit of big toys. Maybe that needs to happen. Maybe we don't need to see 4 Morghast and 10 Death Riders in the same army or something. I'm not sure. Or drop the Leech Cavallos. Maybe that needs to happen. But to me, like, what I would rather see is buff the other things in the game around things like OBR and slaves. So give the weaker armies more points to play with and more options and slightly stronger things. So that's kind of what I would like to see in terms of balance going forward. Thinking OBR is maybe a little too strong, rather than bumping points on OBR, drop points around them and make the other army stronger. Because like, I think this is in a good spot where it feels very strong. I don't know. 1-up saves can feel overpowered and bad into some things. Like, I can see other people being a little sad about that. But I would like to see other things get buffed around it, I think, more than I would like to see points nerfs to this. And like, I do think Catacross probably needs to go up in points. Yeah, let's be real. I think this needs to go up in points a little bit. I think Catacross could go up a bit. I haven't thought about where you go from there if that happens, right? But we'll see. Obviously, this is 30 points under. There's a little bit of room to play here. We'll see. Yeah, there's my OBR video. I hope that was interesting. I hope you enjoyed listening to me talk about the Boner Boys for an hour and 20 minutes. I will try to experiment with this little Morghast Soul Reaper kind of thing and report back. I used it once in a TTS game, and it felt good. I don't know. I don't remember what the rest of the list was, but it certainly, I wasn't like, oh, I was stupid. This is a horrible idea. It felt okay. Yeah, take it easy. I'm gonna try, let's see. I think I'm probably not playing in an RTT or a tournament in November, but there's another team tournament coming up in December at Tables and Towers in Westminster. If you are listening to this and live anywhere near Westminster, I highly encourage you to come out. Ted Adams is running this as a kind of as an intro to team tournaments for the community that plays there. There's a lot of folks that play at Tables and Towers that like don't really travel out so much long distances to tournaments, and like have never played in a team tournament, especially. And like the last RTT there were a good number of people who had never played in a tournament at all, which was super cool. And I hope they felt welcomed and had a good time. So Ted is running this as 3-person teams. So lower barrier to entry of getting a team together. It's going to be 4 rounds, $70 a person, and lunch is included both days, I believe. Yeah, catered lunch Saturday, pizza lunch Sunday. So this is a super good deal. 4 games, $70 a person. You get meals, 2 meals. And it's a great venue. So highly encourage anybody listening who hasn't signed up for this and lives in a place where they could play in it to sign up. As you can see right now, it's still over a month away, but there's only 2 teams signed up right now, one of them being my team. So highly encourage you to just come to that. I am going to Everwinter. I just bought my Everwinter ticket yesterday. So if you're at Everwinter, I will see you there. And my next video is the other video I've been talking about making for ages, which is how to prep for a tournament and how to have a good tournament experience. So aiming at you folks who maybe haven't played in a tournament or have played in very few tournaments. Just some kind of general like tips and tricks and recommendations on prepping for a tournament. Largely like, what to bring to a tournament, what to expect, and then like how to make sure you have good games. So yeah, look forward to that. Hope you all have some good games and play some fun Warhammer, and I will see you in the next video.